Time now for the Sunday Talk. Tonight, the politics of transparency. With appearances like tonight's face-to-face, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is in uncharted territory. No Canadian leader has put themselves in front of the cameras and citizens in quite the same way. And it put Trudeau's open style on a collision course with real people's desire for real answers.
Forgive me if we're a little bit skeptical because we haven't seen much change.
So you're saying that you will be empowering RCMP with more surveillance permission?
No, making sure that security services have the tools they need. A big part of it is listening to you and hearing the concerns of folks like you right across the country.
But in the meantime, I'll be starving and maybe living on the streets by the time I'm 65.
I certainly hope not.
I'm joined by our panelists. Jonathan Kay is editor-in-chief at Walrus Magazine. Tasha Carradine is a columnist at the National Post and iPolitics. And Jennifer Ditchburn is senior parliamentary correspondent with the Canadian Press, and she joins us from Ottawa tonight. So I'll come to you in just a sec, Jen, but I'm going to start with you, Jonathan. We heard from people about really serious issues, of people who are terrified about their futures and wanting really some hard answers. There were some difficult moments. What was your sense on all of these heavy issues tonight and the way that the Prime Minister handled it?
It was incredibly risky. I actually thought he did the best you could do. The big problem is that when you have a personal problem, you don't have a job, or someone you know has gone missing or has been murdered, or there's this entire range of personal problems, and then you're the Prime Minister and you can't solve a person's problem specifically. So you start talking the language of policy and you start talking about programs. And you saw that with Neil, who was the fellow, I think he was 54, and he had lost his job. And he's talking about, I'm going to be on the street, I'm starving. He still has
his job, but he has no pension.
He has no pension, and he's worried. And, we saw fuller tape backstage, and, Trudeau was saying, well, we're going to do all these things to protect seniors and this and that. And he said, well, that doesn't necessarily help me. It puts Trudeau in a very difficult position, and it underscores how risky this project was for him to talk to all these people.
What did you think, Tasha?
I think it was a risky project. I don't agree, though, that it was just personal questions that were brought. There were some questions, such as Malik, who talked about the fight against ISIS and withdrawing our planes that Mr. Trudeau faces every day, asking him another question about radicalization, what he's going to do to combat that. That's something he should have an answer for, and he actually didn't have an answer. And I was quite surprised because the other part was the empathy or lack thereof to some of the personal problems. Mr. Harper was often criticized for having a lack of empathy. I expected more from Mr. Trudeau, and I didn't really see it that much tonight.
Jennifer, what did you think? What was your sense?
Well, I thought there were a few moments that really stuck with me, and one was this woman, Nikki Fraser from Kamloops, who brought actual photographs of relatives of hers that had gone missing. She's an Aboriginal woman. And I just thought, how many households that would have resonated with, being able to show the Prime Minister photos of your loved ones and ask, what exactly are you doing? Which elicited a response from him saying that Indigenous lives matter. And he said, why should I have to say this, but I have to say that. I actually thought that was a really, of all the things that were said, I thought that was the most important moment of the whole face-to-face experiment. And I also was left with the feeling that there's a lesson there for politicians and journalists, that sometimes we focus on the wrong things and the wrong questions, and that Canadians have very particular questions and issues that are important to them, that especially during election campaigns, we're following other pucks and not the ones that Canadians want us to follow.
It really did seem like these people were asking him to solve their problems. But Tasha, you're saying that he could have been more specific in his answers? Or?
Well, their problems are microcosms of problems of a lot of Canadians. And their issues, to Jennifer's point, their issues he did face on the campaign trail. When he told, for example, the worker from Alberta, Danny, the laid-off oil worker, who said, what should I do here? He said to him, well, I'm not a career counselor. That was Trudeau's answer. And he also told him to hang in there. And I found that, maybe he was trying to be funny. I don't know, or connect with him. It struck me as very odd that he would say that.
He wasn't trying to be funny. This is a problem with democracy, because in Venezuela, Hugo Chavez, this was his big deal. No, he would go on camera with ordinary people. He was a dictator. And they would tell him his problems, and he would say, you know what, you have a new house, you have a new job, I'm giving you money. That's what dictators can do. They can solve people's problems. And it was high drama, because it was like watching a game show. It was like watching Oprah. A democratically elected leader can't do that.
Yeah, but I'm not asking Trudeau to be Chavez and say you get a house. I'm asking him to connect and empathize as opposed to seeming glib,
but there's a limit.
frankly.
There's a limit to how much he can connect, because once he connects with a person, he says, "You know what? I'm going to solve your problems. I'm going to be part of your life and make sure you do well." Then you own that situation. And if that person doesn't do well, and some people, there's different situations arise, then it's a sense of betrayal because they say, "You said you'd solve my problem, you don't." So he had to be guarded about how much he could bond with these people. He was in a very difficult position.
Well, he didn't have answers, though. That was my problem.
I thought that was probably the low point for Trudeau of the whole, of all of the interviews, was when he said, hang in there and don't worry, things will turn out right, and maybe the oil companies will come up with these, inventive new ideas for business and so on. I think he was probably struggling to find an answer to someone who had a very personal problem. But really, the real test, and I hope this happens, is if 3 years from now you could do the same show with the same Canadians, so they can really hold his feet to the fire and say, well, this is everything you said to me back in 2016. What exactly have you done to resolve these things that you said you were going to? Because there are a lot of words there, and a lot of what he said is familiar to us because we hear it almost every day on all these issues. But what are they going to accomplish in the next 3 years? Are they actually going to do what they say that they're going to do?
But this is why it's so risky. If I'm with the Conservatives or the NDP, I am marking the names of all these people down. I'm going to go to them in 3 or 4 years, and I'm going to say, what's your situation now? Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? The famous question of politics. All you need is 1 or 2 of them to say, you know what, I'm not better off.
But one of them,
and that person,
of them said that even now, said he didn't get the answers. Neil, the worker from London, said he didn't get the answers, he was disappointed in what the Prime Minister said. So it is risky, I agree, but to me, and we know this from voters, when they see an exchange like this, they're not necessarily going to pick at all the specifics. It is the feeling they get of the connection and the sense of understanding of the problem by the Prime Minister, and that's what I was disappointed in.
But I'm going to push back on that, because I actually think that he did show some understanding of the problem. He was candid. The oil worker, he said, I can't control world oil prices. As a capitalist, that should resonate with you. He's saying, I can't necessarily fix your problem.
He can't.
But
And
that
it's the way he articulated it that was very cold.
He's probably going to get some points for taking the risk, I would think, because he's setting the bar extremely high for future politicians. I mean, I don't think there's anybody going to be able to take the sort of the Stephen Harper school of communications anymore after Trudeau set the bar so high in terms of having this very two-dimensional talk with people, or two-way talk with people, which we really hadn't seen for a long time.
Well, let's actually broaden the discussion a little bit here, because obviously this is not the first time that Justin Trudeau has put himself out there engaging with the public like this, taking risks. Not all of it has been cheered by everyone, but just a couple of flashbacks, because it wasn't just tonight. Quick peek here. From the beginning, every act of government had the feel of an open house.
You remember this?
Oh, it's totally different from when it was as a kid.
The National was invited into his office on his first day. His cabinet swearing in was a public event attended by a crush of crowds. And that cabinet seems to be in front of cameras constantly.
Nice to see you, Minister.
Nice to see you.
Hyper-social in an age of social media. Trudeau speaks the millennial language of the selfie. It's helped give him a celebrity-like glow, drawing fire from the opposition.
The Prime Minister was swanning around Switzerland with actors and billionaires.
Welcome back, everybody! And he's made high-profile appearances on virtually every network, in addition to CBC. So he really has been everywhere. He's been on talk shows. He was with the celebrities in Davos. But we're also getting a lot more accountability. Jennifer, you're the reporter on the Hill. How different is this? I mean, how sharp is the contrast?
Oh, it's a lot different. It's a lot different. I mean, the level of access that we have to cabinet ministers, the Prime Minister comes out of the House of Commons and people can throw questions at him. But it goes to what I was saying before, is that I would really be careful not to categorize selfies and photo ops in the same bucket as answering questions, and that whole exercise of accountability where you have to actually be with someone and answer their questions, whether it's a reporter or a Canadian. I think those are two different things. What's going to be really interesting to see is what happens with this government once they face their first real scandal. Will they continue to put themselves out there to take questions, which will just get harder and harder as the years go on? But really, we went through 10 years where, a video posted on the Prime Minister's website or a photo op or an appearance on TSN was supposed to signal accessibility or accountability, and it just wasn't. You have to be there to answer questions. That's being truly accountable.
Yeah, I think Trudeau gets high marks for his access in terms of the press, in terms of communicating with Canadians, absolutely. And the previous government, however, set a very low bar, so it's probably easy to jump over it, but he has done a lot of that. But I do agree with Jennifer in the sense that there's that part of the job, and then there's the theatre. And the theatre part, he is a very theatrical speaker. He is very comfortable in theatre, selfies, that sort of side of it, the photo op side of it. But I think that people sometimes see a disconnect. I know in Quebec, after what happened in Burkina Faso, there were complaints. People were saying in the public, in the media, it was inappropriate to be taking selfies the day after this had happened. The Canadians were killed overseas, that was a sense of occasion that was missing. So I think he has to be careful not to overplay that hand. John?
I think when Justin Trudeau takes selfies, it's kind of the way you and I sleep or breathe. No, because I mean, as you know, I worked on a book project with him, and I saw him in public, and people just come up to him, I mean, just in waves and take pictures with him. I think he just gets the smile on his face. It's a natural response.
There are ways to control that.
There are ways to control it. What I would say is it's generational. People who are young, and I'd say our Prime Minister is a fairly young person, it's a confessional culture. You're used to sharing everything. You're used to bringing your family everywhere, tweeting things, Facebooking stuff. When you look at older Canadians, I think they're much less comfortable with this confessional culture. They're used to the leader being reserved, being removed, and maybe coming, during wartime, if the king came and inspected a bombed out residence during a war, that was a big deal, because most of the time he was removed, and it was a big deal when he actually met with people. Now it's been reversed, and we expect our leaders to be with the people all the time and full access. I think young people expect that. I think old people find it weird.
I think he's...
We should remember that this is a news management tactic. We shouldn't fool ourselves. I mean, it's just a different way of looking at how to get what you want out of the media. So when you sort of flood the media with interviews and information, that keeps them busy. They don't spend as much time digging up stuff. But it also reminds me of something that Barack Obama said last year in an interview with Jon Stewart, where he complained about the balkanization of the media, how it's so hard to get across something to people because they're watching all different kinds of things. So what we saw tonight, I think, is the PMO realizing that the CBC still has a huge viewership. It's got a big digital footprint now, and they could maximize the number of people that are going to see the Prime Minister talking to Canadians.
Well, I guess that's the point. I mean, we're seeing more, but are we learning any more?
Well, I don't think we learned that much more tonight. In fact, I didn't really learn anything about policy. I learned things about the Prime Minister's performance. I was surprised, negative things. So I think it's risky to do. I think connecting with Canadians is something you do on a regular basis, but this kind of thing almost is a bit too much if he does it too often.
Last quick point, John.
I think we learned a lot, though not necessarily what Trudeau might have wanted. I think what we learned is how difficult it is to connect with people and come out on top in that environment.
Well, it was quite the evening, and I got to cut you off there, Jennifer.
That's okay.
Thanks so much for being with us, all of you, tonight.